You working for ESPN, journalism was one side of it. You haven't always written about sports, but at
Right.
some point, you kind of branched off and kind of stuck there. Would you say that there's clearly a collaboration that occurs in the sports world? Are there more parallels than I'm even aware of that you can point to?
Oh, that's a great point. And to your point, yes, I haven't always written about sports, and I think actually early on at the LA Times I was writing about crime and other things, and then also I had an arrangement with the national desk where anytime I would travel, I would do non-sports related features, which were probably some of the most fun when I did. And if anybody took a close look at my work, they would say that I write very loosely about sports. So the people are involved in sports, but it tends to be about things that are very central to a lot of us. Certainly, some have been about food and wine, and there's some others. Um, but yes, there is. As I've covered the NBA for a number of years, and being inside an NBA organization, you really get a sense of all the different moving pieces that it takes to make that work. And here's what I mean by that. We look at an NBA game and you just see the players on the court and maybe the coach yelling stuff from the sideline and they'll execute some plays. There's buckets scored, a final scored, and that's all. But you don't really, you don't know about the international scout that team has that's based over in Istanbul, who spends, 8 months a year traveling around Europe to all these little gyms and tournaments and whatnot, trying to find a hidden gem of a player that they can draft at some point and then develop. And you don't see the player development that happens, like the assistant coaches or the other people on the player development staff who are working with, say, that player in the practice facility day after day, working on little things, trying to get them acclimated. You may not see the elements of their G League team, their minor league team that are working together. You don't see the athletic trainer and the strength and conditioning coach, the physical therapist who are working on these players' bodies day after day to get them prepared for the grind, or the nutritionist or the chef who's trying to prepare like curated meals to help these players and maybe, accommodating for different dietary things or just, whatever, because they're burning so many calories all the time. So there's so many moving pieces, and then the information gathering, certainly in the front office, they're on the phone. And right now, as you and I were talking, the NBA draft is tomorrow. Free agency is going on. Or I said, what? Yeah, the draft is tomorrow. Yeah. Anyways, it's one of the. I'm so dizzy from all of it. This is one of the busiest weeks in NBA history. And then training camp starts December 1st. The new season starts December 22nd. So it really does take so much more, And then you have like the video room coordinators, which is one of the most kind of, maybe it's the dishwasher job of the NBA. It's like one of the most unglamorous, but like really tireless working jobs. They're in there cutting up so many hours of footage for the coaches, for individual players, so they can watch, and they're breaking down previous games. They're breaking down the games of their future opponents, trying to find all these little things, trying to accommodate everybody's little needs, sending them out so everybody can get them on their iPads and start breaking them down instantly. And the hours they work, it's really, and Eric Spoelstra, the head coach of the Miami Heat, that's where he started. Like the video, he was breaking down film. I think Frank Vogel for the Lakers, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of his first jobs too. So you talk about rising through the ranks. So the collaboration that takes place in sports, I'm speaking obviously with respect to the NBA, is very true in many of these other sports. The army of people that are working behind the scenes and trying to pull together in one direction is really essential to the whole thing. And again, we only see like the players and maybe the head coach and the people on the sideline, and that's it. But like, man, it's really impressive. And the other thing I've learned too is the greatest organizations have incredible communication, collaboration, culture, on the same pagedness. I know that's not necessarily a word, and they're able to do it kind of day after day over a period of years. And so you see that they're consistently very good. They don't have these ebbs and flows, where certain franchises rise and fall as certain players come in that are really good. They're consistently really good. Maybe they're great certain years, but they don't really fall off that much because they have such a great infrastructure, system, culture, where they're able to, you know, even as turnover happens and maybe really good people that they have move on to lead other places, they're still able to keep everything humming along. And I'm sure that's true. You know of great restaurants that are that way, where there have been plenty of people who have moved on and ascended and take over other restaurants or move on to other pursuits, but that restaurant like just keeps humming along because it's got an amazing culture, tradition, you know, what have you. And it's a testament to those places they're able to do that.
Well, even more than that, I think of the people who don't necessarily move on to new roles, but the people who stay in the existing roles. So I'm brought back to a memory of working at Alinea and being there first thing in the morning. And there was a guy who would come in, you know, early morning, call it 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning, which that's a dinner only restaurant. You know, they're not serving lunch. So this guy showing up in the morning, I would scratch my head. I was like, what is he doing? Well, he would come in and he would clean everything. And the night before, the captains would take, you know, little bits of blue tape and they would mark off the chairs that had spots, and he would steam out the stains and whatever chairs that happened. He would shampoo the carpeting if necessary. He would do high dusting. He would do low dusting. He would mop. He would everything, the whole building, top to bottom. Because he did that, the place stayed immaculate. And he'd been there since opening. He was opening staff. And this is a role that he was able to accomplish. He was well compensated by the team and respected and adored, but he was able to take care of his family at night. So he would come in first thing in the morning so he could be a family man away from the restaurant. And I thought that was a huge thing, that he could actually be both. But it's staying in the role. I'm trying to figure out how this glare is going to go. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I you know what? And even as you tell that story, the thing that comes to mind for me is how essential like that one person is and the thing they do. And again, it may seem like somewhat of a thankless job or whatever, but like it's so essential. And, you know, I remember early on in my reporting, one of the things I found really essential was to have a discussion with the photographer who I might be out on assignment with. And there was a little bit, you know, like I'm a writer, they're a photographer, we're both like artists. I'm using quotation marks because they are. And like when I was at the LA Times, like some of the people early on, like had won like 2 or 3 Pulitzer Prizes. They'd been in combat in the Middle East, wildfires, natural disasters all over, huge major events all over the world. And I kind of intimidated, like, you know, what do I say to them? Like, we're out on assignment. But sometimes, you know, I learned, and it was the same thing when I was at the Globe. Like I work with certain people who'd been everywhere, done everything, won everything many times over again. But I realized, like, you know, engaging with them, having a conversation, you know, like, oh yeah, I talked to this person, and this is kind of what they said about their story. And they would say like, oh, that's really interesting. Do you understand, you know, and maybe they have a couple questions for me. And then I would watch how they would shoot maybe a certain photo or whatever. And then it was interesting, like learning about their perspective, like this talent. And later on, like I would see maybe the layout in the paper, and it blew my mind. And so the reason I think of that is the art of I guess maybe not being afraid to have a conversation with somebody within the scope of collaboration, who's maybe really accomplished, and you're maybe a little bit, I don't know. I was certainly intimidated by some of these people, but you realize like they want the same thing that you want. You know, they want this to be the best it can be, and by working together, you can get that. And I have some copies of some of those papers where I was out on assignment with some of these incredible photographers, and it's like you give them a little bit of insider information, and they could make something magical out of it. I really treasure those. So again, it speaks to collaboration.
Love it. Well, let's step in there. What makes a successful collaboration? Because obviously we've seen examples that work. We've seen examples that don't. Sports is an easy one to point to. There's restaurants that open and close. What is the secret sauce? How do you get to success using collaboration?
Yeah, I think I'll provide examples of kind of some of the lessons that I've learned. So I think setting your pride and ego aside for a second and being willing to listen. I had an editor once who said, listening is a lost art. This was actually that one editor who probably should have given up on me at some point, but he was just like, and honestly, and when I left the LA Times, I went to his office and he said, I know I was hard on you, but you're talented and you just needed like some guidance to get along your way. And I embraced him in a long hug. It was really important, you know, for as many times as I didn't like him before that, it all went away. So being able to kind of set aside your pride and ego and listen to those around you, right? Because they may have different perspectives and different insight. And there may be one little thing that they say and you didn't even think of it, right? It was like you were so focused on this other thing and they saw something you didn't see. And maybe that's the window to make this thing all the way better. So honestly, and it can be hard because there's passion, there's emotion involved, and maybe you put so much time and energy into something. But I've learned that just dialing it back for a second, and you need to listen to the people around you. I mean, it's too easy to say there needs to be communication. Obviously, there needs to be communication, but I think the art of listening, of really listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak, but really listening to someone around you and considering the idea, right? And maybe their idea isn't the best, but maybe there's something in that idea that you can take into something else. And there've been plenty of stories that I've worked on now where an editor might say, well, what if we went at it like this? And it's like, actually, that's a good idea. But we don't have this one thing that could make it into the thing that you want it to be. But I do have this. And if we add this, then we could kind of, you know, we could push it in this other direction, which is new and interesting and maybe more engaging for the reader and whatnot. And I think that the other thing I think of too, in terms of collaboration, is understanding, and this may hit on something that you guys feel for restaurants, is understanding that it's not about you, it's not about them, but you're working for somebody else. And in this case, I'm always working for the reader. I'm working for the reader's attention. That is the most important, precious thing. It is the hardest thing to get and the easiest thing to lose, right? So and it's always been true, but it's never been more true because of this, right? A cell phone. So I can a whole world is at my fingertips and I can disappear off into anything and that's it. They can abandon me at any moment. So once you kind of realize in collaboration with others that it's not about us, it's not about your ego or my ego or our pride or whatever. What's the best way we can work together with this thing to give the reader, or say it's a diner or a restaurant, the best experience, right? So once you kind of take yourself out of it, I think that's an important thing. Patience is another thing. Like, you know, I've worked on certain projects that were very hard, and there might be a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I know that's. I was working on a big investigation. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Everybody kind of wanted it like this and like that. At times, you have to take a deep breath, step out of it, and realize, you know, that you have to trust a little bit that it will get there. It will get there. There will be bumps along the road, but it will get there. I hate to use the phrase like trust the process that the 76ers, you know, kind of made famous, but I really have, during some low moments on stories where I was deeply frustrated by the process, I had to trust that, like, look, one day this story, for all the bumps in the road that are existing now, for all your frustrations and the late nights when you're not sleeping and you're frustrated and whatever, there will be a day when it comes out and it will be great. Yeah. You can't accomplish everything right now. So what are the initial things you can do right now? And if it's like talking to another editor or working with certain people around you. So, you know, understanding that there is a process, there's a level of way that things have to be done on the way there. You can't go from A to Z. You have to go through all the letters of the alphabet to get all the way there. I know I'm rambling on and on about this stuff, but like, it's been, and again, I think of a lot of the parallels of the restaurant industry. And certain times I've been in restaurants or talking to people such as yourself and others. It's been really instructive for me, because what you guys do is at such a high level. It's at the highest level, what you're trying to achieve.
We strive.
And yeah, you aspire to that. And that's what certain people on my end do. We aspire to that. I'm not going to say that we achieve it all the time. Certain times we do. And it's, you know, on those occasions we open some champagne and celebrate. But I do think that is the ultimate worthy pursuit of all this, is of the highest level. And if you're going to do anything at that level, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very, very hard. And I've come to accept that too. And I think of the people around me. Like, there's times when I'm demanding of them There's times when they're demanding of me, and understanding that nobody's taking it personally. We all just care so much, and we want it to be at something. We want it to be at this level that we know it can get to, that we know that we want it to get to, maybe it's expected to get to. There's certain stories I've worked on where the material is so special that we know that there's a great story there. So we almost feel like we have something pretty sacred and special in our hands. And we're all demanding of it in such a way because we know that the potential for this is not just to be good, but we can have something like kind of legendary, you know. The parallel, maybe I think of like certain winemakers who, it was an unbelievable harvest, right? An unbelievable year, and they have the best grapes that they've ever had. And they know that from these, they can make the most special wine maybe they've ever made. And you feel an onus, like you owe it to the grapes to get it there, right? But there's a lot of pressure on you as well. And so balancing a lot of these things can be tough. You know, I know I've said a lot about what I've learned, but man, I've really come to appreciate it. And leaning on others, certainly all throughout, has been, again, it's totally changed. I mean, in the 6 years I've been now at ESPN, I've worked with some amazing, amazing people, and being able to tap into their talent resources has, you know, changed the course of the writing that, and the work that I do for us, for sure.
It's interesting. So the things to recap, I mean, you said the art of listening, you know, really tap into that and really understand that that's something that needs to happen. You talked about removing your ego, trusting the whole vision, that everybody's in the same mission. And you say, trust the process, mission, you know, patience. It's when I go to the restaurant side of it, it's interesting because so much of it falls on the chef or the owner of the operation to not necessarily listen. Well, that's important. Listen to their team, listen to the customers, but to articulate at the same time. And I know you said you didn't want to touch on communication, but to have that vision and be able to tap in and let people understand, that's part of collaboration as well, that I've seen go catastrophically wrong, because the chef has an idea what they want to do and the team has no clue what he's talking about or she's talking about.
I love that you said this. And I can't even express to you how close to home this hits for me, because this is my single biggest struggle. Is I can see certain ideas for stories that I had the hardest time explaining maybe to some of my editors, because, and I know what it is. It's like I'll find something that's fascinating, and it's really, and no one knows about it. It was a mystery, an untold story, and there's so much there, and it's going to be great. But I don't know.
Give me an example of this one. You've got to give me an example.
All right. I'll give you an example. This was actually the last story I did for the Boston Globe. We talked about it at Nepenthe, but there I had found out that there was a story about something that happened at Alcatraz in like the mid 1950s, involving Bill Russell, Casey Jones, two future NBA Hall of Famers for the Boston Celtics, and it had never been reported. The only thing that ever existed of their interactions at Alcatraz, the most notorious collection of inmates in American history, and these two Hall of Fame basketball players at the University of San Francisco at the time, which was a powerhouse. The only thing that existed about this interaction was one single photograph that I got my hands on that an inmate had given me. And I obsessed over this story for 5 years. And I was just like, there's some story here. There's something great here. It's never been told. There's no records of it. And everyone who is involved is like kind of dead or dying, or has, you know, they're fading memories. There's not a lot there. But I remember, I thought, because I was at the LA Times when I stumbled across this, I was like, wow, if I ever get to the Boston Globe, like, it would be amazing. Lo and behold, I end up at the Boston Globe and I'm covering the Celtics. And I thought about this story every day for like 2 years. And then a month before, and I had done some good stories. I had like won some awards and gotten some accolades, and had gotten more and more leeway from my bosses to take on some more ambitious stuff. And I remember I went up to my boss, like, what ultimately ended up being like 2 months before I left. I didn't know I was going to leave at the time. ESPN came calling, and that whole thing happened. But I said, like, look, I know this sounds crazy, but there is something that happened at Alcatraz in the mid 1950s involving like two famous Celtics, and it's never been written about. And it's hard for me to put this into words, but you have to let me do this, please. And he was just like, fine, just go do it. But I didn't have, that's not a good pitch. That's not a good pitch, right? And I've struggled with that at times still. And I get so excited about an idea. And I'm just, where I'm saying to my editors, like, look, there's this great story and it involves this thing and it involves that thing and it's never been told and it's going to be great. And I'm just and I've already talked to this person and man, there's so much there. And the thing that you just said, it's so true. Like you can have an idea, but you have to be able to, and editors say this to me, maybe this is helpful for anyone who's watching this to me, but their tip is like, you need to be able to write out in a sentence or two, or maybe a very short paragraph, what your idea is in very clear, concise, plain language, right? Take the emotion out of it. All of your excitement and everything of this, you need to be able to convey this idea to others in a way that they can understand it. And I still think this is something that I need to work on. My editors are very patient with me now. And sometimes they're just like, okay, Baxter's going to go do his thing. And, he'll come back with something good because he often does. But I have really had to work on this, right? I really had to work on this. And I can't stress enough to people that for as much as collaboration is about all the things I mentioned, listening, whatnot, the point that you hit on is maybe the most important thing of all, because if an idea cannot be explained to anyone, it like dies on the vine. It doesn't go anywhere, right? The whole process starts there because everything begins with an idea. And if that idea cannot be conveyed, then there's nothing. There's like no pavement on the ground, for no road to be forged through the wilds of whatever to get you from where you are to where you want to go. So so the point you just said is critical.
You might get lucky, but luck is one of those kind of terrifying things to count on.